Hello and welcome to Our Kijiji, where Kijiji stands for Village in Swahili. I am Misha of Makai'sMom.com, and this is episode 3 of the It's Complicated podcast, where my colleagues and I are going to discuss a very different topic from our last episode where that got kind of heated. So I'll allow my colleagues to, or not allow. Y'all introduce yourselves. I got to be careful the words I use. And then we can get into the subject.
Yes, empower us. I'm Amber.
Kelly.
Ashron.
All right.
Okay. That's me. So,
Play your role, girl.
I know. I'm trying. Today, we're talking about gentle parenting. And how did we get to this topic? So, I attended a training. It was a trauma-informed training, and the subject of spanking came up. It was a room of Black and brown people. There was one white person there, and so there was, what you can imagine, robust conversation around the differences in parenting and different ideas on spanking. And so I brought that to the group. We talked about it at a lunch, and just the conversation evolved into our thoughts around spanking, gentle parenting, yelling, all of that.
We should probably describe our parenting styles.
Sure. And to your point about yelling, I didn't even really think about that until I read some of the articles. And as you all know, I prefer it to not be scripted. However, we do like to do some sort of research and have articles sent to us by Sharon, thank you, so that we can prepare and not just speak from our perspective, but hear other people's perspective and then weigh in on how we feel about it. So, yeah, the yelling just came up when I read the articles. I didn't even think about that in reference to gentle parenting, because I'm thinking, as long as I don't lay my hands on you, that's gentle. Yelling is a thing.
Well, I think that's important. I mean, there's a range.
Right. So what is gentle parenting?
Okay. So I think it is a very hard to nail down topic and definition. But one that I found that I think is helpful says, gentle parenting at its core is an understanding of parenting as a unit with your child by creating healthy boundaries, natural consequences, no threats, no physical harm, and encouraging positive reinforcement. And the reason I like that one is because I think it encompasses what the person who coined the term gentle parenting was trying to get at, which was respect, empathy. There are some definitions that talk about not using shaming. And so it really gets to some of those things that we do. It's not even that much about not putting your hands on kids. I mean, I think that's the baseline given, but it's about all of the deeper things that I think we don't think about, because I said so. I don't know that I think that's not gentle, but apparently it's not.
I saw that.
Because you're supposed to be a unit and respect them just like you expect to be respected.
We'll get back to that because I said so. I think is important in some instances, especially in regards to safety. I don't have time for you to weigh in or explain. It's for your benefit that you do it now. But to your earlier question or statement about us describing our parenting styles, I think that's important. You want to go first?
Sure. So I do feel I believe that I was strict. I had a strategy, though, for parenting. First of all, I'm pretty type A personality. So even when my husband at the time and I were discussing having children, then I just started reading more books on child development and just really understanding the different stages of developing children. And so, yeah, so that's my mindset. And when I've had my first child, I just knew how important it was for attachment and for, to be able to have that bond. And one thing that I always kept in my mind was the importance of the first, 3 to 5 years of a child's life being foundational. And because of that, then it really influenced the way I bonded with my child and how I wanted to make sure that they felt loved and secure. And then as I started talking to people with older children, then people start saying things like, oh, be prepared, your child's gonna lie to you, so just already know they're gonna lie, and just started saying all the different challenges. So at that point I made a decision that I wanted to be strict on the front end, and then as they grew older, then I was going to let up the reins. And and I understood how important it was, for me to be able to trust them and for them to feel safe to share, to come and to share things with me. So I practiced Magic 1, 2, 3. There's a timeout system, and I was criticized heavily by my black folk, family and people I've just met. But essentially it says that you give a child opportunity to correct their own behavior. So if you see that they're doing something, then you tell them like, hey, put that down. And they don't put it down, So then, son, I said, put that down. And they don't put it down. And then you just count. 1, put it down. 2, put it down. 3, put it down. They don't put it down, then you send them a timeout. So then you send them a timeout, and they receive 1 minute per year. So at like 2 years old, 3 years old, then, they're in that corner. And that is the worst thing for a child is to be in timeout because they don't want to be isolated, but you put them in timeout. And then once the 2 minutes are up, I will set a timer, and then I'll say, son, go put it down. And then they'll put it down, and then you just move on. Like, you don't sit down, have a long conversation about it. You don't do any of that. But the gist, though, is that you have to be consistent. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter if I'm in a grocery store, the mall, at home, a birthday party, church, wherever you are, you have to be consistent. And so I'm proud that I was proud of that approach. It got to the point that my son started putting himself in timeout. But he's very conscientious. And I know that he also wants my approval. So then, I begin to loosen up. And at this point, they're 9 and 11. They are, we don't really have major issues.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah, we don't have major issues. And there's been times where, they're around family or other, friends and children, and something will happen. And then I'll ask a question, and I can, and everybody just take the vow of silence and not want to say anything. And he's kind of looking around, fidgeting, and my daughter too. My daughter will test the boundaries a lot more than my son. But then I would, I'll go to him, and he would just like tell me, this is what happened. And then even if as other children like, why you tell you a snitch, blah, blah. It's like, well, you just shouldn't have done it. So that's where we are right now. But I would say that it was very difficult. And I had the privilege too, at the time, I was consulting. So a lot of my work was at home, and that became more and more difficult as I started going back out in the public. And that's not to say that I have not like popped my children. So I'm going to be, upfront about that too. And more so like with my daughter. And then I had to, but I probably could count on my hands. So I never really spanked as a, system.
That just sounds like a lot of work. I mean, but it sounds very like I'm just sitting here like, oh, I wish I did that, but I didn't.
So what did you do?
Yeah. It's been a lot of years and a lot of kids, but I grew up in a house where I was spanked, and so I didn't want to spank my kids, but I did end up spanking my kids. But not as a first strategy. I think a lot of times I felt like, number one, I didn't have any of those conversations. Like, oh, we're going to have kids. Let me read some books. Let me figure. I didn't do that, which that sounded great too. I should have done that. But I think when I had kids, I was young. I was 23 when I had my first daughter, and then 19 months later, I had my second daughter. And so I just thought kids were crazy. Like, I mean, she didn't want to get her hair done, nothing. And I think because it was this kind of perpetual state of pregnancy and breastfeeding, a lot of what I did was like avoid. Like if she didn't want to get her hair done, I didn't do it. Like, why? Like, okay. Why do I care? Because I am tired. You know, if she had a temper tantrum, you know, which happened later, maybe 3 and 4, I would just let her be in her room and do that. Like, okay, take the space that you need to do that.
What about publicly though?
Well, you know, I had a lot of kids. We didn't go out a lot. But, I mean, I don't know. Publicly, I don't know what I did. But I think definitely there's a difference in relationships too. When, you know, my way of dealing with it, my husband's way of dealing with it, completely like going out without your hair done was not okay for him. So he would just, you know, take the L, do her hair, you know, fight with her, struggle with her. He comes from a mom who was a hairdresser, so it just, you know, she needed to look a certain way. So he would be, he would dive in more to the chaos and craziness, and I'd be like, yeah, I just can't deal with that, can't go there. But definitely going into parenting, I didn't want to spank, but I ended up spanking because, like they said, they will lie to you. They will take your stuff. They will do a lot of things. And I just felt like it was just completely inappropriate behavior that needed to be corrected. And so at that time, I spanked. I probably yelled. Mostly I tried timeout, but I think that consistency of doing it every time was like, okay, I just can't even manage this. But also the minutes for the you know, how old they are.
Yes.
Was so important. And I think sometimes, like, if you're 1 and it's a minute, or if you're 2 and it's 2, it just didn't seem like long enough. You know, like you need.
I thought you was going to say it was too long.
No, it's like you need to reflect on this a little bit more to break the behavior. So I don't know. I remember feeling like none of these strategies really work. And I remember feeling like spanking definitely doesn't work. So why am I doing it? I got to that point where I was just like, I'm hitting them. It doesn't work. So I'm just hitting them, knowing that is not going to change anything. And I didn't feel good about that. So with every kid, I mean, every kid got spanked less. Like my daughter who's 11, I don't know if she really even got spanked. But I also... Like my husband will tell this story. He used to work in a bank as a teller when he was in college, and a family came in and the son was in like galoshes and a cape. And, you know, it's like, wow, so you let your kids decide that they wanted to wear this. And without kids, that seemed crazy. But I come back to that all the time because that's also a big core of my parenting. Like, I want them to be free to express themselves, do whatever they want to do. And I don't want to sweat the small stuff and fight over stuff that doesn't really matter. So I think from the outside looking in, like you got criticism from Black people. I mean, I think about my mom or my grandparents or my, you know, great aunts and uncles. Like they would think I'm crazy.
Presentation meant a lot though in our culture. So yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and I've had to slowly let go of that too.
Right.
Like
right.
that when you go out, you are a representation of me. I mean, well, they'll try that anyway and go out looking crazy. But I had to, you know, there's been a lot of things that I had to just unlearn and let go of. And a lot of it happened because I'm outnumbered. Because, I have 5 kids, and so you just can't manage all that. And so you have to let some things go. So I don't know. I'm trying to lean into being gentle, but my oldest daughter's 18, so for some it might be almost over. A little late. But as they got older, I think like you, I let go a lot more. So, and they got better too.
And you'll continue to evolve.
Yeah.
Right. There's no manual, right? Very cliche, but it's true. And it's practice. Until it's done. So I don't know how I would describe my parenting. I will say though, I have evolved. Before having kids of my own, that's inclusive of my bonus kids, I was the straight up, oh, you getting a whooping, like easy, like whoop them. Oh, they acting up?
I used to do
Whoop
the
'em.
same thing
Whoop them, whoop.
in the store.
You're not getting enough whoopings. Like, give them a whooping. That was me, right? But then I guess once my bonus kids came to live with us, and then certainly once Jacqueline was born, I was like, yeah, maybe not so much. One, it just takes too much energy, right? And I had always thought like there were rules to whoopings, right? It's like you cannot do it when you're mad. And they age out. Like once they're like preteens, like you can't be up there whooping a 13-year-old. That's like abuse now. In my head, I had rationalized these things. And I had also, before I was a parent, said, I'm not going to be rationalizing with the kid because I'm not doing that. They don't understand what's going on. I'm not talking to you. Just do what I say. And here I am, rationalizing with kids. So things definitely changed as I got older, as I actually started to parent. I think I am a talker. And so I probably have to be careful with talking at them and versus having a conversation with them. I am a lecturer. And, you know, I will yell sometimes, but I don't start out yelling. I don't start out yelling. I don't start out hitting. I don't start out pinching, right? Now, I think I'm gentle-ish. I will keep in my arsenal minimal, I call minimal, corporal punishment, like a pop or a pinch. I don't think I will, at this point, ever go to a whooping, right? And when I say whooping, I mean like hardcore, get the belt, go get a switch. You're getting this beat down, poor kids. That is not in my arsenal. My arsenal is a pat on the butt. Come on now. I didn't ask you like 20 times. And I'll tell you guys what I do with little Jacqueline. And it's not that often, but just every now and then. I do know or feel that it's not a one size fits all type thing. Each kid is different and each kid requires something different. When I was growing up, I didn't get spankings. I was sensitive. So if my mom yelled at me, that was enough. It's like, oh, yep. I've done whatever I did, and let me go find myself a little corner and think about it. But, you know, my siblings, they might have needed a little something different, and they did need something different. I do pick my battles, too. Like, I think it is a privilege to even think about gentle parenting. And I think it entails a lot of patience and time. And there are a lot of times I don't have time to battle with kids. And I've also determined that I'm not going to get into a power struggle with a kid. Like, you know what? Yeah. This really isn't harming anybody. You got it. Example, at the Galilee Community Day.
Oh, yeah.
Jacqueline was adamant, Jacqueline is my 6-year-old, that there was going to be some water activity. I knew there was not going to be any water there, but she knew for sure. And she wanted to put on her swimsuit under her clothes. And I'm like, you know what? Have at it. Choose whichever swimsuit you want and let's go. And we got there was no water, but she had her swimsuit on. Who did it hurt? Nobody.
Yeah.
So go ahead. But also with Jacqueline, she mirrors me quite a bit. And so it's very funny. And, you know, she doesn't always listen the first time I ask her to do something, or the second time, or the third time, or the fourth time. And so when we're in those situations, I just start to count. Now, it is not timeout, because we used timeout with my nephews and niece, and it didn't work. So, you know, that I have that in my arsenal, but I don't use it too much. So I will start to count. And once I get to 4, Jacqueline knows what's coming. And that is Misha's favorite type of corporal punishment, a pinch. And so it happened enough times that she knows. So she comes and gets done what I need her to get done by 3. And we're good. So mommy does not have to pinch. So I don't know how you describe that other than gentle-ish with a little amber flavor, maybe some mixes of traditional, some mixtures of the more gentle type parenting. But I do rationalize with my kids. I do want them to have voices. We talk. One parent I have who has been an inspiration to me is my aunt. I admire the relationship that she has with her daughter, who has always talked to her, even about things that seem odd for a teenage girl to have talked to their mom about. And so I want that relationship with my kids. I want them to feel like they can talk to me so that I can hopefully influence them more than the outside influences. And so I do, even with my pinching, even with a loving tap on the butt, encourage, hey, talk to me. Like, the worst that can happen is like really nothing, right? Just talk to me, right? I might be dying inside, but like we can figure it out.
Yeah.
So again, practice. It's not perfect. I'm learning every day, and trying to be better and do better. I mean, because the one thing I'm trying to avoid, I don't want to ruin my kids. Right. So, I'm trying.
Thank you for that explanation about spanking, though, because I do want to say, when I said I spank, I wasn't talking about whoopings, like belts and stuff. So
right,
I'm glad you said
there's
that.
levels to it.
Because I was like, let me just clarify.
Well, I whooped. Since there are levels. It was a belt. Because my son has always been larger than his biological age, so certain things just didn't matter anymore. Like, my sister gave an example of my grandmother whipping her, our great grandmother whipping her with a cloth belt, and her just really acting like she was in a whole lot of pain, but it was not hurting. So yeah, it just wasn't going to have the effect, and we're probably going to have a part 2 because y'all's explanation of parenting has really been long. Nevertheless, my son is now 19. And again, has always been larger than his biological age. And I came into it with showing him who was in charge, because I was a single mom. His dad was present but didn't live with us. And he spent a lot of time with other people. So I worked a lot. I worked non-traditional hours. So he spent a lot of time with my mother, my grandparents, and an aunt. And of course, we all know when they get to that level, they don't have the energy or the time to enforce the things that we want them to. So that means when he comes to me, I kind of have to be the bad lady and say, do this, while he's freely taking his time to eat, taking his shoes and clothes off to eat, and enjoying life with other people. I had that in my head. I had the fact that he was a male child, and so I needed to prepare him for the world. I had in my head, this is how you show up when you go out of here. Don't embarrass me. I won't embarrass you. That's what my mother used to say. And my mother thinks that anytime we say something, my sister and I say something, it's because she was a bad parent. No, she wasn't a bad parent. It was just that we had to adjust to current times and the current individual. So my mother did spank me. And the whole thing of, it hurt me more than it hurt you. And I'm like, how? Because ain't nobody hitting you. You hitting me. I understood it, though.
Yeah.
Because the only time she spanked me was when I lied. She hates a liar. And I had to learn that when she asked me a question, she probably already knew the answer. And in me, as I aged, I knew I was lying and still could not control what I was saying because I was afraid of what her response would be to the truth. Not understanding that it was going to hurt her more to lie to her than to tell her the truth. So because she said she couldn't trust me, and that bothered me. But as I aged and matured, I understood why I was lying. It was a generational thing I had to break, and that the truth may hurt me to say and may hurt you to hear. I still need to say it because that's all I have is my word. That was the same issue I had with my son, was him telling the truth, and it was for fear of my response to him telling the truth. And so it was like, I'm going to have to whoop you because you're not hearing what I'm saying. You're not obeying. What stopped me was the embarrassment at school, because I used to go to school, one, just to check in, show the teachers I'm here. if instead of disciplining him, if you have to, talk to me first, because we don't want that paper trail, and making him know, hey, somebody's always watching. I went to school one day, got off work, was angry because I had to get off. Well, I wasn't angry. I was upset because I had to get off work. And I took him outside of school and I whooped him. And that shook me because it's like, did I do the right thing? How is this going to affect him later? I had to do it because I would rather me do it than the police officer. Now, let's stop there. That's a traumatic response.
Yeah. Yes.
And I was always preparing him. In the event I'm not here,
Yes.
this is what you need to do.
Yes.
I don't think white families do that.
No.
They don't prepare for death. They don't prepare for if I'm not here. This is preparation for life, and I'm going to be here to enjoy it with you. That was my perspective. This is what you need to know and how you need to act in the event I'm not here. And so as he aged, we began to have more conversations, which mixes the traditional with non-traditional, because I came from an era where my mother allowed us to talk to her. She was still the mom, though. She still wasn't our friend yet. She didn't become our friends until we became adults. I'm not your friend. I'm your parent, and you can't do what your friends do. I said some of those things. However, I still wanted the door to be open that he openly communicated. I would rather you tell me than you tell a stranger and they give you some advice that doesn't apply to you because they don't know you. So he communicated more, and so by high school, he was like, Mom, why are you coming to school? It's not going to change what I'm going to do. I'm going to just do it when you leave. And so that opened the door for us to communicate and me to tell him, hey, as long as you do this and I can trust you, we're cool. And now that he has graduated high school and in college, I have told him, I'm still your mom. However, I'm your support system. So I'm going to give you advice based off of what I think you should do, but you're an adult and you're going to make the decision based off of what you want to do. I'm going to come to you, or you can come to me for support. Now, I will be mom if I have to, because you don't know everything. I don't know everything, but there are some things I do know that you need to know. And so I'm going to say, as a parent, this is what you have to do. And I've noticed in our conversations, when I show up in a supportive role, he becomes defensive because he still feels I'm that teen. I got to prove to you. And I'm like, you don't have to. And I've had this conversation recently. You do not have to be defensive. I'm supporting you. You are ultimately going to be responsible for your decision, but I'm just a support now. I've done it. And I can see how he backs off. He lowers his chest, takes the little bass out of his voice, because that's another thing, like, who you talking to? Now, that's something I still say, because you can talk.
Oh, yeah.
But know who you talking to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it is varied. I have apologized for whooping him. And he did come back and say, which made me feel good. I still wonder if he talks about it in therapy, though, that, Mom, if you didn't, I would have kept going. It would have been a problem. So I understood why you did it. I know why you did it. Now, embarrassing, I didn't want to continue. And because we have social media. So him sleeping, I'll never forget, he slept with gum in his mouth and woke up with it all on his face. And I told him, stop going to sleep with gum in your mouth. And so I posted it. And he wasn't bothered by it. But I look back on it because Facebook will show you your memories. I was like, yeah, that wasn't a good move. I probably won't ever do that again. Because now I'm in an era where you can always see it. It's always there. So I'm mindful of those things. I will say me being open about my parenting is how I got here. Sharing the things that we were dealing with, and him a lot, because I did ask his permission for that. Him sharing, the hard times during COVID, when we didn't think he was going to even go to college, when we didn't think he was going to continue to live with me because he turned into somebody else. He shared those things, and it's helped other people. His friends now come to me asking certain questions and asking for support because they've seen our relationship. And if nothing else, that matters the most, that other people can come to me for support. However, I don't want them coming and my own child feeling like he can't. Right. Yeah. So that's important enough that he told them to come to me, because if he said it, it must mean that she's cool. Mm-hmm. So all of that is important in how he shows up. Now, I still have to unlearn telling him certain things as a Black man and balancing what I should say as him being a Black man and him being just my child. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something as Black people,
what's an example of that?
Our address recently changed, and so we changed our registration. And so I made sure I both cars are under my name, so I changed the registration, but made sure he went to get his license done. We had an appointment that was a couple months out, but he travels back and forth to school, and so I was like, I need you to go in person. So Thursdays when you go to class late, go. You may have to sit for a couple hours, but get your license changed, because what I don't want to happen is you get pulled over, the addresses don't align, and we have a problem. I don't think white kids have to do that.
Yeah, and that was like a major takeaway, and I believe that like this entire conversation, especially with Black people and parenting, is rooted in our Black experience in this country. And with that one article, I just pulled this quote, and it said, "Mistakes Black children make outside their parents' care, especially during the Jim Crow era, have greater consequences." And during those times, that was an act of love. I love you so much. I don't want you to end up like a Trayvon Martin. Yeah. And that's real. That's real. And I know I felt that same way too. Like with the whole hoodie thing, I would cringe. I'm like, take that hoodie off of your head. And they were young. They didn't understand. But it is, and that's what, as parents, that's what we want to do. We want to protect, our children. So with that though, it also just really had me reflecting on what you shared. And I think all of you are amazing mothers. So let's just start there, with amazing children. Yes. And I think what when you were just saying, I just want them, like they're just going to be who they are. And, we attended the Black SEL conference. Shout out to Kristen, doing an amazing job. And, at this conference, I was part of a round table where we were discussing liberation. And it's like, well, what is liberation? And it's like, it is really, we felt that it's really a mindset. It's a mindset, and it's also action. But in order to take action, in order to be someone who's liberating or to struggle with liberation, then you must have, you must have a liberatory mindset. You must believe that you are free. And I think that, right now, if I had to say, just share like what I felt was important for Black parents, it's not so much of really trying to protect our children, but it's like, what does it mean for us to raise children who are free? That they are free to be themselves. We're going to wear this swimsuit, wear the swimsuit. I'm the same way. Like I could go back and forth, go ahead, do it, and what you're saying, like, listen, just, you don't feel like it, do it. I mean, of course we have to establish those parameters. But that is very different than how most of us, were raised, right. Most of us were raised as millennials and generations, prior to us, because we were stacking all these different constructs within our mind and all these different boundaries within our mind and passing them on generation after generation of what you cannot do, how you have to show up, how you have to move. If you do this, you're going to die, and it's just like, that's a lot, and so now it's like we're looking to build a free community, but we have we have generations. I got spankings as well, but you have generations of don't act like this in front of white people. Don't embarrass me here. Don't do this. Don't do that. And we hear it from older generations now, like these children, when I was when I was their age and all the other different things. But it's just like we're still have chains, and we have mental chains. And so we want like liberated children. We'll be able to produce a liberated community,
But two things with that though. One, I think we can't fully do that until we continue to do the work so that we can be free in our community. Because we can tell our kids to do that. However, they're still going to get pushback when they show up in society. And I think along with that, they are able to show up as themselves and we're okay with saying it because we've created a community that is saying, okay, we're going to show up a little bit differently. We're going to parent a little bit differently. But that's taking work as parents to see what the issues are. Yeah. We're fighting for those things. And but I still think I don't think they can fully be free and feel liberated until we continue to fight and do the work for this country to see us as
I
such.
think there are levels.
Yes.
Because like that's the galoshes and cape for me. And that's what we
Yes.
talked about at the lunch too. Like I just want my kids to be free. And when I looked at little white kids, you know, and the galoshes and cape was a white kid, my thing was like, well, when they are at the restaurant and they're loud or they're standing on the chair or whatever, their parents are not preoccupied with all the things that we're thinking
Yes.
about, like, well, what are other people thinking? And when you're out, you're a representation of me and all that stuff. And so I think there are things that, and we talk, I think this is the theme with the podcast, like what have we taken on that doesn't serve us anymore? There are some things that, you know, we need to be safe. But there are some, but we have kind of just put that to everything because it's not just safe. It's also about, you know, how you're representing me, how you look, how you speak. And we are putting so much on them. And I think when my kids were 2 and 5 months old, I started graduate school for a master's in counseling. And one of the things that we learned, like 2 things that are, this is kind of not the way to say it, but that you shouldn't do are having like shoulds and musts. Like, and so that shaped a lot of my thinking too. It's like, there is no you should, you must. Like you have to allow people the freedom to kind of figure it out. And we have a lot of shoulds in the Black community around parenting. And one of my mom's friends was at our house and she was like, well, Ashron, you know, none of your children spoke to me when they came into the room. And it shook me a little bit because I was like, my God, I'm raising these Black kids and they're not being Black. You know, because she was like, you know, we don't do that in Black families. And I was like, okay. I had to sit with it. But then I was talking to my husband and I was like, but I have deliberately parented them so they didn't feel like they had to do anything but be themselves. And so they in their house. And they came downstairs. And I thought, like, well, how do I treat other people's kids when I see their kids? Do I have an expectation that they speak to me? No. If I see Makai, I'm going to say, hello, Makai.
Right.
I'm the adult.
Correct.
Like, why should he speak to me
Me too.
just
That's a
because?
good example.
Or when I saw, you know, if I see your daughter or your kids, because I thought about this. I was like, when I saw Kelly's kids at the vault, did they speak to me? Like, but did I even think about it? No. When I met Jacqueline, no. I'm just like, hey.
Makai doesn't speak to Kelly, and I have a problem with it. So
But
now that
we
you
have
said
those.
that,
And that's what I
you will
told
speak
you.
to
But
me.
she probably
I'm like,
doesn't have a problem with
No,
it.
I'm like, hey, I'm going
They're
to speak to him.
teenagers.
And I'm
They're
like over the top of
kids.
him all the time. So,
But it's those things that we have that we
That's
have
true.
to kind
Yes.
of unpack. Like, why?
Yeah.
because it's a
Why?
respect thing.
But
It was. It
is.
was.
But it gets so weird.
It does get weird.
Because I think a lot of times people did not let kids be kids.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
That's the thing.
And they got so wrapped up, and still do get so wrapped up in their feelings. Like, so you have to take a step back, right? And we're talking about whatever, 1 to 20, right? Because they're kids, right? They didn't speak to me. Okay. I'm the adult. Like, let
Say
me
hello.
speak to them.
And
Yes.
they will say hello
and they
back.
will say hello back.
Yes.
Or when you're talking about the smaller kids and you're not getting the reaction out of them that
Oh,
you
that's
feel like
weird.
you should get,
Right.
and you get upset.
That's
I'm
weird.
like, no, you need to check yourself. They're
Yes.
kids,
Yeah, they're
right?
kids.
And some of them are being taught stranger danger.
Right.
They don't know what to do.
Or that they own their own bodies, like with the
Right.
hugging. And that's the
Yeah,
thing. I
no,
want my
I think it's
children to
weird.
be like, for me, I'm prioritizing their safety and how they feel and their emotions. And, you know, maybe they're going through something. Listen, they're all teenage girls. They're always going through something.
Yeah. You
So,
can't get
maybe
offended.
they're going
You
through
cannot get
something.
offended.
Right. And you know-
and people just walk around offended,
Yeah.
waiting for a reason to be offended. And I have to remind people all the time, like, they're still children. Like,
Yes.
it is okay. Big on expression. And again, there is a lot of, I think, checking yourself in parenting, and I think it's just a skill that you have to develop. And there are things Jacqueline and Jordan, my older girl, will say, and in the moment I'm like, and then I'm just like, express yourself, girl. Like, let me know, tell me how you feel, and then we can talk about it. I have tried and it's hilarious. Well, Jacqueline, who you talking to? She'd be like, you? I guess you aren't talking to me.
Yeah.
Okay, baby, you can't say that to mommy, okay? Like, let's try it this way. And she'll be like, okay, mom. Right? It's not malicious. She doesn't know, right? She's probably heard me say it.
I was gonna say, like you said, they're mirrors of us.
And
Yes.
it's like, okay, calm down, mom. Like,
Yes.
she's really not challenging you. Like, you might see it like that in that instant, but take a step back, take a deep breath, and it's okay.
Yeah.
You're
And I would just say and one of the worst places it shows up, and this is why oh my goodness, I snaps all over the fact of we need to check ourselves, you know, and that's the thing. Like we often, we as parents, you know, we may not be as socially emotionally intelligent as we think that we are.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So and that shows up like in our schools. So when you look at like the disproportionately rates of children, like right now in our school district, our children are getting kicked out of school left and right, punished, yelled at, talked down upon. You know,
K3.
Yes, and the reason why is because I believe that's the thing. We don't, you know, I feel like Black children are not, you know, we've done a poor job of letting them know that they are free, you know, and so when they're showing up, like just culturally, then I believe that other people, when they're dealing with our children, then that's the expectation they have, like, oh, you're not free. You know, so when you do start, you know, you express yourself, oh no, like, let me write you up. Let me put you out. We're not asking like, well, how are you feeling? You know, or maybe you're shy. Maybe you don't want to talk.
Right.
Maybe you had a bad day, but it's just like, oh no. And so that's why we have to break that down, you know, so our children know that they are free. And then for others to know our children are free, you know, like they are free Black children. And we need to make sure that, you know, we are creating environments that upholds that they know that, and that everybody else will begin to treat them in that same way.
I need you to mind your business. You call me out. And I'm going to tell you how. My open house, my speech was, I'm Makai's mother. I'm here if you need me. Should there be any issues, call me and I'll jump right on top of it. My mother told me 3rd grade, she said, stop doing that. Because what you're doing is you're giving them awareness that something may happen.
Yeah.
And even if it's nothing that big, because you've warned them, they're going to call you.
Yeah.
3rd grade was his second Black teacher. And it was his worst year. Because she took what I was saying and that heightened her awareness to, oh, he did this, I'm going to call his mama. He did. And he wasn't allowed to be a child. So that was a huge thing that I had to unlearn. I think I'm going to, one, advocate for the educator. My child's not going to come in here and act up. And if he does, call me. Right. And he told me in later years that he felt I was always on the side of the educator. And I had to tell him, I'm on the side of whomever is right. If it's you, if it's them, I'm going to course correct whoever the person is. And I had to do that very visibly in middle school that's when, you know, he grew and the teachers became afraid of him and he saw, oh, I am Black. I can't go over to West Forsyth. I probably need to go to a school that's a little more mixed. And how much relationships matter. Because when you connect with other educators who know you, which everybody who goes to school doesn't have that ability, but I'm from here. So I was able to put him in schools that I knew people and they knew, okay, I know her. Let me tell her what I saw because I know she'll take care of it. But every child doesn't have that. Right. And it shouldn't have to take that for them to be treated fairly.
And I think, and I'm not speaking for you in that instance, but a lot of times, you know, because when my kids have been in private school, I haven't necessarily said, you know, let me know and I'll take care of it. But there's this fear of like, they're going to get in here and, you know, show out in a way that they shouldn't. And so you overcorrect for that to say, like, that. I will handle them. Yes. Yeah. And it's like, what do you mean you'll handle them? Nobody else is showing up. Right. Like, I will handle.
Right.
Why does your voice change?
Sorry.
No,
But
But, they're not doing that.
I had to tell my husband to stop. This is when the kids were a little younger. And I will say my role as mom is different with my bonus kids. I have to take more of a backseat role and shift more into the I'm here to support and fill in the gaps as necessary. And if I absolutely have to take the wheel, I will. But for the most part, let me know if you need me. I'm always here type thing. But I had to tell my husband to stop telling the teachers, sit him in the front because he's lazy. I'm like, you are putting in their minds, right, to focus on him. But from his perspective, he thought he was helping, right? But from their perspective, depending on who the teacher was, that was only like a battery in the back to target our child. I'm like, nah, let them find out on their own.
That's right. That's exactly what my mother said.
We'll deal with it after that. And so I give speeches too when I go to like the orientations, but my speech more so is, I'm an attorney. And, Jacqueline is amazing and blah, 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 blah. And I'm going to be very present. Yes. And, I know that different people have different lenses. And I'm aware that sometimes kids get treated differently. And somewhere or another, it's like, but not my child. And so I want you to know, I've put you on notice that it won't be mine.
Yes.
So
here for it.
We're partners, and we're going to get through this school year great, and we're just going to have a great year.
I think that's great.
You lead with a turn.
I think. Well, no, you know what? I think that's great. And that's how I believe that parents should show up. So everybody's like, oh, where are the parents? We need them, and we do. We do. And they need to show up and they need to let it be known. Like, my child is amazing. They're not perfect and I'm here and I'm going to be here and this is my responsibility, and your rescibility is to educate them. And let's partner.
Yeah, and I'm gonna support you.
Yeah, I'm gonna absolutely.
Absolutely. And I'm not. I am her biggest fan,
That's
but
right.
I know when my child is wrong, and I am here to correct. But I will correct you too if you're.
Yeah, I'm more about correcting them.
And then sometimes too, just asking the children. Like I remember one time, Kalanji was, he was talking. All his papers were saying he was talking in class. And so then I gave him a lecture. Like, you're not going to talk in class. You're there to get an education. So I'm sure he basically toning me out. So I'm realizing because I'm beginning to tone myself out. So then I'm like, let me step back. I was like, you know what? Like all this. I'm like, come on, G. Why are you talking in class?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, because she's boring. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to keep up, Mommy, but she's like, I'm just bored. And then I just don't know. Next thing I know, like I'm talking, to my friend. So then I'm like, oh, and you know what? Like he could be bored. I get bored. That's fair. So at that point, I'm like, okay, I get it. And I affirmed him. You know what? She probably is boring. I believe you. And then that's when he began to just kind of share that, he was really interested in, this, but she would, and, he tried to ask a question and, she really didn't engage. And so he just like, I don't know, I'm just sitting there. So after I spoke to him about it, and then I spoke to him about it and then just coached him like, okay, here's maybe some things that you can do, when you're bored, and we did that. And I also let, I let the teacher know as well, like, he's just not engaged, he's bored and this is why he's behaving this way. And I understand, I get it, that shifted his behavior. It shifted his behavior. He was more conscious, about talking. And that's what he did. So I'm like, if you're learning about trees, then, she may not go into details or she may not explore the things that you're interested about it. But then you go home, you get on YouTube, and then you go look up the things for trees. And then when you go in and you make sure you raise your hand or before the class and you share with her. And, and his behavior did improve.
And it probably changed her perception.
Right.
Yes.
Too,
Yes.
because that's the other thing. The way we see kids talking in class as bad can shift based on your perspective and perception of the kid. So if now she sees him as like really interested in the topic, and he went home and he looked at YouTube and he loves, what I'm teaching here, she's probably
That
like,
affirms
okay.
her.
Right. 'Cause
That
it's
She's
affirms
probably
her.
okay if he's talking. She's like,
Yeah.
but I know that he
Yeah.
knows this stuff.
Yeah.
I know he knows this
Yep.
stuff
That's
or
true.
whatever.
Gets that pass, that privilege, and that is the thing that our children don't have. So, however we build it,
So we need to we're gonna have to have a part 2 because we do need to talk about the privilege portion of
And the
what
trauma portion.
That
we have to
yes,
go to trauma.
because there are a number of facets with gentle parenting. Because again, we came in with one thought until we started reading the articles, and I'm not gonna say it shifted what we were thinking, but it gave us more conversation to have. I do want to share this quote from the one you shared, Aisharon, from theroot.com, that says, gentle parenting allowed me to see my child differently as a partner in his own growth and upbringing. It's permission for both parent and child to make mistakes, to be held accountable to each other for them, and to move forward in healthy ways. It invites both parents and children to be soft and to let themselves relax into the process and trust each other enough to let the growth and learning unfold at its own pace. I think that kind of sums up or speaks to our conversation today. We're going to have a part 2 because there's so many more things to talk about from all 4 of our perspectives with the children in your age range and how each of them show up differently, and why I chose to have one, because I knew I only had the energy and support for one. Because every child is different.
Yeah.
And so that's going to take a different level of energy. And I literally had to take a year of rest because it was work to get him to that point. Because he didn't see what I was seeing. He was being a kid, right? And so when I had to fight to, no, you can't turn stuff in late, or you got to be the first to apply. He didn't understand that because everybody else was doing it. And I'm like, whew, I'm tired. But we're running out of time, and we definitely need to get to the one thing that isn't complicated. And it's listed on here. I'm supposed to go first. I have nothing.
I have something.
Go.
That
Go.
quote, when we were preparing for this, the one thing that isn't the one thing that I thought is, oh, I can have this conversation with my kids now. Like that exact quote. I can share the podcast with them or share the articles and talk to them now about gentle parenting, apologize for the things that I've done, but be like, y'all, this is like a journey that we can all go on together.
Absolutely.
Starting today, or maybe I started a couple years ago. I don't know. Whenever I'm gonna ask them, when do you think I got gentle?
Yeah.
But I think that's the one thing for me that's not complicated. And I think Amber said it too. Like you can, start from any point and like start the journey. But I do think it's important that even if it's not gentle, you are intentional about
what you're doing.
You're doing, and for what reason.
And it's not out of anger. Yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
That's a whole nother conversation, because do we have time to think before we react?
Well, that's why we have to talk about the trauma part and the privilege part.
And you are gentle, but your tone can be stern from experience.
And I see that in them too. I see how they got that from me.
Yes, and I'm sitting here trying to look at my notes. There's so many things, but I think they're all complicated. So. Parenting is hard work. And I believe that the more you lean into it, the more you change as a person. I think that it should be a self journey, and it requires support.
Oh my goodness!
It requires support. So it's not that complicated, Get support because it's hard.
Love and affection. I think throw away the notion that you can't be loving and affectionate with your children, that you always have to be the strong, kind of dominant force. A lot of times a hug will We'll solve a lot of problems. And I'll be brief. But there was one time when Jacqueline was she was going nuts. And I just did not know, like what is wrong with this girl? And I just said, come here, give me a hug. I hugged her. And it was a total shift. She stopped. And we were good. And that doesn't work all the time. But a lot of times, kids just want some love and some attention, and give it to them.
They don't have the
Connection.
vernacular to articulate why they're doing it. So
Right.
it takes those actions to do it. What's not complicated is to admit you're wrong and ask for help to correct. Speaking to the numbers of the disciplinary report for the district, as well as parenting, being able to admit that I shouldn't have whooped you, and ask for forgiveness. And then when I talk about being able to correct, the district has admitted, hey, these numbers not lying. How can we correct it? And asking community for help. So yeah, we can do better. We can do better, but we have to come out of ourselves and ask for help and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. Help me figure it out. Make sure you can trust the people who help you, though. Any other closing thoughts? I do say that we want to continue the conversation, so be sure to comment. I know it's not live like typically on Instagram, but we will respond. And stay tuned to our Kijiji to know when our next episode is going to be. I will say this: be vigilant, be careful. I pray you continue to be well. The only constant in life is change. In a perfect world, we'd be able to adjust accordingly. But in this world, please do not be afraid to ask for help as you adjust. After all, this is our Kijiji, for us, by us, to help us be our best us. Until next time.